Have you ever had that moment when you look at a situation and think, there's no way this is actually happening? Well, there it was. It was a sunny Tuesday. I had just made my coffee with milk to perfection and was preparing for another quiet day in my humble suburban retreat when I looked out the window and there she was, the bogan Karen, parked right in my driveway. Again. If you live in Australia, especially in a middle-class neighborhood where everyone knows each other by their dog's name, you know that a blocked driveway is more offensive than getting your coffee order wrong at Macca's. And she didn't just stop there like she owned the place. She parked with a confidence that only a bogan Karen could have. You know that kind of confidence that ignores signs, logic, and private property? The kind that only comes after 3 cigarettes in a row and a loud, "Don't bother me," shouted to the wind? Exactly that. But let's take it easy. I don't want to give you everything at once. This isn't a Channel 9 reality show. It's a real story full of twists, sarcasm, and passive-aggressive revenge. Spoiler, it involves an automatic gate and a week off work. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that when a Karen invades your driveway, the best response is classic Aussie style. Don't argue, just make it difficult. And before you think this is just neighborly petulance, let me tell you. This woman turned my driveway into a bus stop. And no, she didn't ask for permission. She simply decided that this was the new parking spot for her Holden Commodore, because according to her, it's just for 5 minutes. Sure, and I'm the mayor of Sydney. If you've ever had to deal with a Karen, or better yet a bogan Karen with a degree in inconvenience, you're going to want to hear this story to the end. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and get your tea ready, or a beer if you prefer. Because the saga of the Gate Karen is going to give you as much laughter as it will second-hand embarrassment. Before everything goes haywire, my neighborhood was a nearly perfect slice of suburban Australia. You know that place where kids still ride their bikes to the bakery, neighbors know each other by their dogs' names, and the postman knows when you're on holiday just by the color of your grass? Yeah, it was that kind of scene. A typical quiet suburb, with white picket fences, weekend barbecues, and the comforting sound of a magpie singing loud enough to remind everyone that the dive bomb terror still exists. My street in particular was one of the calmest, a cul-de-sac, almost no traffic, a place where the biggest dramas in the neighborhood WhatsApp group involved complaints about bins being out of order, or the new annoying noise from the lawnmower of the bloke at number 17. I had lived there for a few years, having invested in a modest but comfortable home. Nothing extravagant, just my peace space. And of course, there was my pride. The driveway, newly asphalted, well-defined, with no cracks, almost a work of art from Bunnings, if you catch my drift. This driveway was more than functional. It was a silent declaration of, "This is my space, respect it." I even had a discreet sign saying "private driveway," more out of protocol than necessity. After all, no one had ever thought to use it. Until she showed up. The first time I saw her, I'll admit I thought she was a lost visitor. She was driving a silver ute, the kind you see being driven by a classic bogan. Loud music with AC/DC, an Australian flag in the rearview mirror, and a car air freshener shaped like a beer can. She stopped right in the middle of my driveway, got out with a cigarette hanging from the corner of her mouth, and an attitude that screamed, "I do what I want." At the time, I even thought it might be some mistake. Maybe she was just maneuvering? Perhaps she was looking for someone? But no, she parked, locked the car, and walked off like she was in a Kmart parking lot. I stood there frozen, trying to process the absurdity. I'd never seen that woman before. She definitely didn't live on the street, and nobody knew her. She was a complete intruder with inflated self-esteem and a distorted sense of ownership. In the following days, she came back. Not once, not twice, but several times. Always parking in the same spot, right in my driveway, completely blocking access. I tried to stay calm. After all, nobody wants to be the neighbor who flips out over anything. But this was no longer a case of just a moment. It had become routine. I started noticing more details. The woman had no sense of community. She tossed her cigarette butts on the ground, talked on speakerphone loud enough to scare the cockatoos in the area, and laughed loudly. That nasally, high-pitched laugh that sounds like a broken truck brake. Oh, and here's a detail. She had the habit of leaving the car running while she went to take care of some quick things. Because, of course, burning fuel while parked is an inalienable right of the bogan Karen. Talking to the neighbors, I found out that no one really knew where she came from. Some said she was a friend of someone from the street behind, while others thought she just used the street as a convenient stopping point. But whatever the case, one thing became clear to everyone. She was there to cause trouble. And the most absurd part? She acted as if she had the right to be there. It was as if my driveway, my clearly marked private space, had magically transformed into a public extension of the city's parking lot. The sense of invasion was real, and it was starting to wear down my patience. But like a good Aussie, I still tried to keep the no worries spirit. However, as we'll see in the next chapter, there's a limit even to an Aussie's patience, and when you cross that limit, well, that's when the gate closes, literally. The day came when it was no longer possible to ignore it. Karen had already established herself. It was like an intrusive bird nesting where it wasn't invited, and then pecking your hand when you tried to shoo it away. It was clear, she wasn't going to leave on her own. And the most impressive thing was the level of confidence. She didn't hesitate, didn't look around, didn't ask for permission. She parked as if my concrete had her name engraved on it. I could already imagine. Maybe she thought the street was part of an abandoned shopping center, and my driveway was just a forgotten VIP spot. It was on a Friday morning that the inevitable confrontation happened. I was in the garden tending to some native plants, trying to forget the world for a few minutes when I heard the distinctive sound of her engine. A roar that sounded like a diesel engine with bronchitis. I looked ahead, and there she was, Karen, stopping again. Only this time I was there, face to face, and I didn't intend to let it slide. She got out of the car with that typical walk of someone who already arrived ready to fight. Body leaning forward, chest puffed out, cigarette firmly between her fingers, and a half-squinted gaze as if she had prepared an entire monologue for a discussion that hadn't even started. She was wearing an 80s cover band tank top and leggings so tight they looked like body paint. I took a deep breath, with the calmness of someone who still believed in the power of dialogue, and walked up to her. "Hi, sorry, but this is my driveway. You're completely blocking access." She looked at me as if I had interrupted the MasterChef final. "Okay, but I'm just going to grab some stuff really quick, all right? Just 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Always the 5 minutes. The most deceitful time after, "I'll think about your resume." I tried to keep my good humor. "So the problem is that you've done this before, and I really need to use my driveway. Can't you park further up?" She huffed, literally, a soulful huff. She looked at the car, then at me, then back at the car, as if she was trying to understand whether I was real or just a manifestation of morning fatigue. "Come on, relax. No one's going to die. It's just a little driveway. I'll be right back." And she walked off, without waiting for a response, without looking back. At that moment something changed in me. It was like a click. You know that moment when you realize that the person in front of you simply doesn't respect anything? That no matter how polite, reasonable, peaceful you try to be, she's not going to budge? Well, there it was. Karen wasn't there to negotiate. She was there to dominate. In the following days, I tried other approaches. I left a note, polite, direct, with neat handwriting and even a "thank you" at the end. The next day I found the crumpled note on the ground with tire marks over it. On another occasion I waited for her at the gate and tried another conversation. The response? "My brother is a cop, so I think you should be careful about how you speak to me." The classic Karen card. The cop brother. Always a relative in law enforcement. Sometimes it's the brother, sometimes the cousin. I've even heard stories with an uncle in shopping security. What matters is the bluff. The idea that she has some kind of diplomatic immunity that authorizes her to ignore basic laws of coexistence. I knew that confronting her directly wouldn't help. Not with someone who sees rules as suggestions and private property as temporary public space. She was the type of person who would return meat to the supermarket after frying it if she thought the doneness wasn't right. And, mind you, I'm a laid-back guy. I like peace, enjoy nature. I watch bird documentaries of my own volition. But even calm has its limits, and she was crossing every one of them. It was at this moment, this point of silent rupture, that the plan began to take shape. Not an aggressive revenge, nothing loud, nothing calling the police, as tempting as that was. No, it would be something subtle, elegant, painfully passive-aggressive, the kind of response that makes a person think twice before repeating the mistake. And it would all start with a simple gate. But we'll get there. After the last confrontation, it became clear. Any attempt at conversation with Karen was pointless. She was one of those people who, if you try to educate her, interprets it as a personal attack. And like any good Aussie who has dealt with a bogan armed with disrespect and a band tank top, I knew that arguing would only lead me to the same place as my garage entrance, blocked. That's when an idea began to ferment. At first, timid, a vague thought, almost poetic. What if, instead of asking her to leave, I simply prevented her from entering? I went into the house, sat on the couch with my coffee, already cold because anger kills time, and began to research. And as every well-executed plan starts with a click, off I went, diving into the council's website, neighbor forums, and Facebook groups with creative titles like Australians Against Clueless People. The idea was simple. Install a gate, a real gate, nothing symbolic, something automatic, imposing, almost theatrical, a physical no, made of metal, with a motor and presence sensor. And let me tell you, nothing channels anger quite like it to make you efficient. Within 2 days, I had quotes from 3 different companies, an approved plan, and even the model chosen. A sliding gate, in matte black aluminium, with a modern design and a strip of private property, written in letters that screamed passive aggressiveness. It wasn't just a gate. It was a declaration of war with elegance. The installation was scheduled for the following week, and in the meantime, I made sure to keep smiling when Karen parked, pretending that nothing was happening, that she was winning. This would make it all the more satisfying when the gate came down for the first time. And to ensure she noticed, I made a point of being in front of the house with the installer on the day of the assembly, sipping my coffee, watching like someone appreciating contemporary art. And what a scene. The gate arrived by truck. 3 professionals unloaded everything as if they were setting up a SpaceX rocket in my backyard. The neighbors began to gather, curious, forming an informal audience. The lady from number 9 brought a beach chair. The gentleman from 17 appeared with a beer in hand, and when the first rail was welded, I heard a collective murmur, as if the whole street was watching the AFL final. During the installation, the cherry on top, Karen showed up, and of course, with her car. Only this time, she was forced to stop a few meters back when she saw the gate being assembled. Her expression? A mix of confusion, indignation, and fear, because she understood. It wasn't just a gate, it was the end of the fun. She got out of the car with her usual posture, chest out, eyebrow raised, and asked, "What's this?" I responded with a gentle smile and a tone sweeter than it needed to be. "A gate, to secure my entrance. Long-standing project, you know. You can't do this. It will disrupt the traffic on the street." Ah, the irony. The very person who parked there as if it were her garage was now worried about traffic. I smiled even more. "Don't worry. It's all been approved by the council. In fact, I have the protocol here in my email if you'd like to have a look." She stood there, chewing the air with her eyes. She huffed, of course, threw her cigarette on the ground, which I already knew she would do, and went back to her car. Not before uttering the standard phrase, "My boyfriend will come here later. He understands these things." Yes, of course. The boyfriend who is an expert on gates, property laws, and logic. Probably the same one who wears a tank top and thongs even in winter. But the installation proceeded steadily, and when the gate was completed, with remote control, motion sensor, audible alarm for brute force, and a hidden emergency button, I felt as if I had placed a wall between my sanity and chaos. It was more than security. It was a silent shout of, "Enough!" The next day, Karen returned. She tried honking, tried calling out, even tried talking through the intercom. Nothing worked. The gate was my new frontier, and every attempt she made to cross it only reinforced the triumph of engineering over her inflated ego. A new phase was beginning, and the cherry on top? I had a trip planned for the following week. The timing was perfect. The gate was installed, functioning, and I, ready to leave Karen face to face with her own impotence for 7 long days. But that is what we will see in the next chapter. With the gate installed and working like a charm, more efficient than many zoo fences, it was time for the final move, the trip. It was something I had been planning for a long time. A week in the countryside, away from the noise, the honking, and especially the Karen. But now the timing had taken on a special meaning. It wasn't just an escape from routine. It was the culmination of a plan. I started preparing with almost childlike pleasure. I organized everything with military precision. Bags packed 2 days in advance, house locked up, security camera tested 3 times, and most importantly, the gate. Ah, the gate. I made sure to check every function before leaving. Remote control, working, presence sensor, active, app notification system, installed on my phone ready to send me alerts in real time, like a live soap opera of Karen's behavior. And as a good lover of technology and irony, I left the system with an automatic message on the intercom. Private property, restricted access. Please respect others' space. Have a nice day. A calm and polite robotic voice, almost an institutionalized mockery. On the morning of the trip, I closed the gate tightly, parked the car in the garage, and went to fetch my temporary rental in the countryside. A simple chalet, but with decent Wi-Fi and a porch overlooking hills that looked like something out of a gourmet cheese commercial. Absolute silence, fresh air, and most importantly, no silver Commodore parked in my entrance. But of course, as a good strategist, I knew that the real fun would come from the security cameras. Just on the first afternoon, I received the notification. Movement detected. Front gate. I opened the app, and there she was, Karen, standing still in front of the gate, like a sphinx challenging the entrance to a temple. Her expression was a mix of confusion, indignation, and a hint of desperation. She pressed the intercom button as if it were a doorbell for a door-to-door salesperson. First attempt, honking, long and insistent, as if the gate would give in to sound pressure. Second attempt, clapping. Yes, clapping, as if she were calling a dog back home. Third attempt, the old trick of calling. She picked up her phone and spent a good while talking, gesturing, pointing at the gate. Perhaps she was calling the so-called boyfriend who was an expert in understanding things. The next day, another notification. This time she was accompanied by another character, the boyfriend. Tank top, poorly done tattoos, hair tied up in a loose bun, and the classic attitude of, "Let me handle this." He tried pushing the gate, tried looking over it, and of course, after 3 minutes, he gave it a light kick at the base, followed by a swear word that the microphone picked up perfectly. It was like watching an amateur theater play, but with real characters and no sense of self-criticism. And the best part? I was watching with my feet up, a cold beer in hand, and the sun setting on the outback horizon. Over the 7 days the attempts varied. One day she just looked. The next she shouted. There was even one time she brought what looked like a printed letter, perhaps a document complaining about the installation. She put it in the mailbox, took a photo, and left stomping away. I found it so theatrical that I almost got up to applaud. But the gate? It stood firm, unyielding, impassive, and silently victorious. By the time the week came to an end, I already had a collection of videos that would make any comedy channel on YouTube envious. And more than that, an inner peace that only someone who has defeated a Karen without raising their voice can understand. But the real cherry on top was yet to come. Because if Karen thought she had suffered enough during my absence, she was about to discover that my return would be even more educational. Coming home after a week away should have been a moment of calm. That lovely feeling of being back in your space, checking on the backyard, seeing if the plants survived, and if the neighbor's dog was still barking at the wind. But this time, the return had a special flavor. It marked the conclusion of an unintentional social experiment, and spoiler, the result was hilarious. I arrived on a Sunday afternoon, the sun shining brightly, the sky a flawless blue. I turned the corner of the street and immediately sensed something was in the air. The atmosphere felt tense, as if my arrival had witnessed a saga worthy of a reality show during my absence. The gate, of course, was in place, imposing, closed, absolutely immaculate. But the surprise came when I got closer. Tire marks on the ground, a crumpled package stuck in the fence, and the most curious thing, my mailbox was stuffed with papers folded in a hurry. It was as if someone had tried to leave a manifesto there. Spoiler, that someone had a first and last name from the internet, Karen. As I stepped out of the car, I was immediately greeted by my neighbor from across the street, Mrs. Glenda. She didn't say, "Hello," she got straight to the point. "You missed a show, love." That woman came back every single day trying to get in. She even called the police. Can you believe it? I smiled. Of course, I believe it. Glenda, who had always been some sort of unofficial committee member of the street, recounted everything as if narrating an episode of a soap opera. Karen was shouting, kicking the gate, and even threatened to sue for emotional distress. That's right. The woman who was invading my property was emotionally disturbed by not being able to continue invading, and it was in this climate that she appeared. Like a carefully rehearsed script, Karen turned the corner in her silver Holden, accelerated to stop in front of my house, and got out of the car. The pose? The usual one, hands on hips, chin out, half-smoked cigarette between her fingers, and an aura of, "I'm ready to cause trouble." She came towards me like a runaway train, and the dialogue that followed was worthy of being framed. "This is all illegal, all right? You can't just install a gate like this. It's against council laws." I took a deep breath. The moment was mine. "Karen, I submitted an official request. It's all approved. In fact, I have the protocol printed and emailed. Want a copy?" She froze. Dramatic pause. But like every good Karen, she quickly regained her composure. "But I've always stopped here. Always. You never complained. Now out of nowhere, you make this up? You only did this because of me." I looked at her and said, with all the calm the occasion deserved, "Exactly." The pause that followed was long enough for me to hear a kookaburra laughing in the background, as if the universe itself were mocking the situation. "This is harassment. My uncle is a lawyer, all right? I can sue you for emotional damages." Of course, the lawyer uncle. We had already gone through the police brother and the boyfriend who knows things. It was only a matter of time before we reached the relative with a legal degree, the holy trinity of Karen. "Go ahead, Karen, but I'll let you know that the security camera footage shows you invading my property for weeks. I can even send it to him if you want." Another pause, another huff. She tried to change the subject. "And what if there's an emergency? What if someone needs to park here quickly? It's selfish to keep a gate like that. Emergencies have protocols. Ambulances stop on the street. Official vehicles too. But parking because you're in a hurry to grab a fish and chips? That unfortunately doesn't fit the definition of an emergency." She let out one last indignant sigh, turned around, and went back to the car. But before getting in, she threw an envelope onto my lawn. It was a handwritten notification claiming emotional damage and stress caused by the gate, signed only with K. Bogan. I took that as a trophy. I framed the sheet and placed it in my office, next to the camera that recorded all the glorious moments of the saga. The most curious thing? Since that day, Karen has never parked there again. Now, a few meters ahead, on the other side of the street. And believe it or not, she uses her turn signal. Almost a miracle. I wouldn't say I changed a life, but I definitely gave it a nudge. And the neighbors? They've never been happier. Some even thought about crowdfunding to install more gates on the street, one for each house. The Gates for Peace movement started there, as a joke, but with the potential to become a trend. Karen, for her part, continues to live among us, still complaining about the price of petrol, still talking loudly on the phone, but now, outside the gate. And honestly, that's already a victory enough for me. Now that the dust has settled, the gate remains firm, and Karen has found a new sidewalk to disturb. It's time to stop and reflect, because behind the laughter, the absurdity, and the scenes worthy of a documentary on extreme human behavior, there's a pattern, a phenomenon. The bogan Karen is not just a person, she is a symptom. You know that type of person who walks through the world thinking that rules are optional and that every space she occupies automatically becomes her territory? Well, that's Karen. She is the sovereign of just 5 more minutes, the champion of "my relative works in the police," the ambassador of "I have rights." And the most interesting, or sad, depending on your point of view, is that she genuinely believes she is right. At its core, Karen's behavior reveals a deep inability to coexist. It's as if she skipped the classes where they teach respecting other people's space, not invading private property, and of course, not being a walking nuisance. All of this combined with the typical bogan attitude, a mix of unfounded self-confidence, pride and ignorance, and the unique talent for turning the mundane into a diplomatic crisis. The blocked entry case is just one example among many. Anyone living in Australia has seen it all. Karen trying to enter Bunnings without a mask shouting, "This is discrimination." Karen arguing with the security guard at Woolies because he asked her to show her backpack. Karen demanding a refund for a barbecue used 3 months ago because it didn't heat up the way she wanted. Everything documented, everything recorded. Because one thing Karen never considers is that the world has cameras and memory. But why does this behavior persist? Simple. Because for a long time no one has challenged it. Most of us, trying to keep the peace, end up conceding. We avoid confrontation. We accept the "just a minute," let the shout slide, ignore the shove in the supermarket. Until a moment comes, like it did for me, when the limit is reached. And the response doesn't come in the form of a shout. It comes in the form of a gate, a concrete attitude, a line drawn, with an automatic sensor and remote control. The truth is that you don't need to stoop to Karen's level to defeat her. On the contrary, the most powerful weapon against Karen is well-applied patience. It's polite revenge. It's the act of not responding to rudeness with rudeness, but with structure. Literally. Because if there's one thing Karen hates more than being contradicted, it's being ignored by a structure that doesn't waver with shouts. A gate, a law, a camera, an awkward silence. That is the true poison for Karen. Indifference combined with efficiency. In the end, my gate situation turned into almost a modern parable, a lesson in civility, coexistence, and limits, a proof that you can indeed say no and make that no carry weight, firmness, and remote control. So the next time someone tries to invade your space with the famous "just a minute," take a deep breath, smile, and think, what would a gate do? And thus we conclude this beautiful suburban opera in 3 acts: invasion, gate, and redemption. A narrative where the unwanted protagonist was defeated not by force, but by structure. Literally. Karen tried, Karen failed, and the gate won. Recapping this saga worthy of a miniseries on SBS, we had a peaceful neighborhood, a clearly marked garage entrance, and a Karen who thought rules were mere suggestions. The story followed the classic script of Greek tragedy with a bogan twist. First came the invasion, then the denial, followed by the attempt at manipulation with influential relatives, and finally, the emotional collapse when she realized that the world doesn't revolve around her silver Commodore. But what really made this story special wasn't the gate itself. It was the lesson it represented. Because deep down, everyone has had a Karen in their life. That person who ignores limits, thinks everything is just a minute, and always has a ready excuse to justify the unjustifiable. And when you finally take action, no matter how simple it is, like installing a gate, putting up a fence, or simply saying no, you are not being rude. You are protecting yourself. You are reaffirming your right to exist without being constantly invaded by those who live as if the world is an extension of their own backyard. The truth is that in the end, Karen didn't want to park. She wanted to dominate, and when she realized she could no longer do that, she had to retreat. Perhaps not by choice, but by lack of alternative. And this, my friends, is the sweetest of victories, the one that doesn't require confrontation, just consequence. Now, if you laughed, felt indignant, or simply saw yourself in this story, whether as the homeowner, the neighbor who just observes, or even the gate installer who just wanted to finish the job and head to the pub, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Here we talk serious without losing the cheek, discuss real cases with a pinch of irony, and above all, defend the right to live without being disturbed by a Karen. And of course, give us a like, comment down below if you've had a similar experience, and share it with that friend who has thought about buying an automatic gate just to stop being nice. Oh, and don't disappear, all right? Because in the next episode, we have a new saga coming up. The Karen who tried to return a used barbecue at Bunnings without a receipt, with charcoal still inside. Yes, that happened. And you won't want to miss this spectacle of uncontrolled self-confidence. Until then, keep your gates locked, your patience calibrated, and remember, sometimes the best argument is silence, followed by a click on the remote control.